Just last week, the second trailer to Avatar Fire and Ash dropped, which gave us a ton of information, from how Spider changes to a Medusoid exploding, as well as Quaritch and Varang bonding. So let's talk about it. Avatar Theory here, hope you're doing well and having a fantastic day. And as mentioned, this trailer dropped last week, which gave us a lot of information. And as some of you might know, I was away during that time, so I couldn't post a breakdown straight away. But now, after having watched the trailer multiple times, there's quite a lot to dig through. So let's waste no time and jump straight into the trailer.
This is the only pure thing in this world. The fire came from the mountain, burned our forest. My people cried for help. But Ava did not come.
So the second trailer opens and wastes no time by showing us Varang immediately, where she gives a speech essentially about what happened to her people. Now, from this first frame alone, there may be a few things to unpack. Now, of course, you can see her holding her hand above fire, probably some sort of fire pit. And right there at the back is a little small pot of something, maybe liquid, that's burning on the end there. However, if you go back to watching the first trailer of Avatar Fire and Ash, you may remember that there's a shot in there where it seems like Varang is playing with some sort of liquid that lights on fire, and you can see that it's essentially the same pot but just from a different angle. So these two scenes are definitely connected. Now, in that shot from the first trailer, you can also see somebody standing behind her, somebody, well, blue, with a hairstyle that may resemble that of Quaritch. So it is possible that in this opening sequence of the new trailer that she is essentially inducting Quaritch into the Manquan clan, because we do see him in their paint later on in the trailer, and we also see a Quaritch Ash warrior figurine, so we know he is going to join their clan at some point, and this might be part of their induction process. Now, Varang does say that this is the only pure thing in this world, obviously referencing to fire, and as she is explaining the story of her people, saying the fire came from the mountain, it shows a shot of a burning or an active volcano with lava flowing down it. And at first you might think that this is a flashback of sorts, but it's actually just a continuation of a shot we've also seen previously in the first trailer, where we see Quaritch walking up the mountain. So these two shots are just connected to try and give some sort of story, but I don't think that they will of course be connected in the movie. The reason I'm saying that is because Varang's next line, she says that the fire burnt their forest. Her exact words were, quote, burnt our forest, end quote. And then it shows a shot of the Ash Village. Again, the shot where Quaritch arrives at the Ash Village. So the trailer kind of tries to connect her speech with different shots, just giving you the indication that, you know, a volcano erupted and burnt their home, which interestingly is almost what happened to the Metkayina, but during Turuk the First Flight, where a volcano also threatened their home tree and the sacred tree of souls. Varang then continues to say that her people cried for help, but Awa did not come. And you can see her expression changes once she mentions Awa not helping her people. So of course Varang and her people has big hatred towards Awa because of everything that happened. Also, for a moment there when Varang moves backwards, you can see some hooks hanging behind her, which honestly looks quite terrifying. I'm guessing that everything in the scene takes place in her hut. We see her walking out of it in the first trailer to Avatar Fire and Ash, so I'm guessing, you know, all of this is inside that big tent, and I don't really know what those hooks would be used for. My guess is probably hang some food or potentially enemies, because we know the Ash clan is completely disconnected from Awa and is the evil Na'vi on Pandora. Also, another thing I noted that at one point when it gives us a close-up of Varang, you can see a small scar on her nose, so of course she's probably been in many battles. And also towards the end of the sequence, when she moves really closely to the camera, if you look into her eyes, you can see some sort of blue pattern. I'm not entirely sure what that is or who that is, but I'm certainly intrigued by this. Whereas this sequence of the trailer closes off by showing us the 20th Century Studios logo and of course Lightstorm Entertainment. As the trailer progresses, it shows us two Na'vi on top of two Ikrans flying through the jungle, which is Lowak and I'm guessing Nateam, which I'm speculating this is either some sort of flashback, dream sequence or a memory sequence of sorts, and a continuation from the scene which we saw at the start of the first trailer to Avatar Fire and Ash, and we can clearly see that the Na'vi in the front is Lowak, the one turning upside down, because once it turns upside down you get this close-up shot which you can, like I said, clearly see that it is indeed Lowak. Then as it cuts to a shot of a Tulkun jumping out of the water, you can actually see behind it seems to be another Tulkun. So this is likely a lot of Tulkuns just having fun in the ocean, and as the Tulkun is going further out of the water, you can see two Na'vi on its side fin, which is Tireya as well as Kiri, and this Tulkun is actually Tireya's spirit sister, because if you look at the tattoo around the eye, it matches that from the scene in Avatar The Way of Water where she talks to her spirit sister, so we know it is the same Tulkun. Then after the Tulkun dives back into the water, it cuts to a shot of two Ikran and four characters. Now on the one Ikran, the furthest one, you have Kiri and Spider, and the closest one of course is Lowak and Tireya. You can see they are flying away from the Metkayina village, and as the camera pans around, you can see the Wind Traders arriving with those massive jellyfish-like Medusoids being pulled by the wind rays. And counting these, I can still count 6 of them, so I'm guessing there will be 6 of these caravans as well, but I'm still not sure how many Na'vi one of these caravans can house, so it's still uncertain how much or how big the Wind Traders really are. We do get a glimpse inside one of these as we see Spider and Lowak walking in a shot which was actually part of the first clip that was released for Avatar Fire and Ash. If you remember, not too long ago, exclusively on MetaQuest, there was a clip released which was part of the Wind Traders, where the Sully families essentially meet the Wind Traders, and we can see how they are basically acting as pirates, pulling the sails, pulling the ropes, and just shouting like pirates, reminding me a lot of Pirates of the Caribbean. But we see Lowak wearing his riding gear, those riding pants, and of course Spider still with a mask here and his new poncho, and it's very important to note that he is in fact still wearing a mask, because I will touch on that later on in the trailer. Now, one thing that I would like to speculate on or theorize on is, for a brief moment there when Spider turns around, you can see a female Na'vi, a female Wind Trader, running next to him, which looks a lot like Kukulope, the Wind Trader from Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, just the hairstyle, the clothing outfit, and we know Kukulope is basically all around in the game. She travels a lot, so could this potentially be a cameo of her in the movie? I don't know yet, that is of course just theorizing, but what do you think about that? In any case, moving on to the rest of the trailer.
This world goes much deeper than you imagine.
As the trailer progresses, Jake then makes his first appearance in the second trailer with an interesting piece of dialogue stating, that this world goes much deeper than you can imagine. And I personally think that he's talking to Quaritch here, because we know there is a scene where they're going through the jungle at night that includes Jake, Quaritch, Loak, Kiri, Tuk, and Spider, which was shown in the first trailer, where you can clearly see them in line. And this shot of Jake right here, right behind him, you can see Loak, Kiri sleeping next to Tuk, and then there's an arm sticking out there, and I'm guessing that it is Spider. And of course, like I said, Jake is then talking to Quaritch, and everything, the light, the scenery, everything else matches up with that section of the first trailer, like I said, where you see all of them walking in a swamp in the jungle at night. And you can see Jake is pretty beaten up here. He has some bruises, he's bleeding on his forehead, so this likely takes place after their attack from the Mangkwang clan, because we know they travel with the Wind Traders, and at some point the Mangkwang clan attacks the Wind Traders. So my theory is that here they get separated from the rest of the clan, as well as Neytiri, because we know Neytiri also gets injured in that attack, and she probably returns to high camp, or her Ikran returns her to high camp, knowing that it is there where it's safe. And then at some point the kids here gets captured by the Ash clan, but I don't want to go into too much detail about a plot theory. That I will keep for a different video. But yeah, like I said, I do think that he's talking to Quaritch here. Then it transitions to a shot of Kiri underwater, wearing that gill mantle on her back, which helps her breathe underwater, as we saw from Avatar: The Way of Water, where they were introduced. And we also saw Kiri wearing this at the end of Avatar: The Way of Water, where she gave it to Neytiri. And in the shot of Kiri where she is about to turn around, you can see there at the back is actually a crab suit. You can see what looks to be two Mako subs, and actually at the bottom there is also another sub. So she definitely seems to be surrounded by the RDA, but we do see this tentacle, or this part of the tree, lighting up. And as Kiri turns around, we can see a light getting brighter, and her expression on her face is almost like a relief, like a sign of being thankful, which gives me the indication that this scene is connected to another scene at the end of the trailer where she asks Awa for help. So my theory here is that she asks Awa for help, and then as she is attacked by the RDA, Awa then helps her, mirroring that of what we've seen at the end of the first Avatar movie. It then shows us Kiri and Spider in front of the Metkayina spirit tree, and interestingly enough, this was leaked a long time ago at an exhibition where we saw Spider with a Kuru connected to a tree underwater, giving us our first indication that Spider will indeed get a Kuru and he will connect to the spirit tree of the Metkayina. The tree then lights up, and you can see Kiri's position, the way her body is angled one way, her head is looking towards the spirit tree. So I do wonder if this scene is connected to this scene. It just kind of looks like it might, because in the scene of her face, of the close-up of her face, we do see some of the spirit tree next to her, and we do see that light up. So I do think that these two are connected. But interestingly, if you look very closely, you can see Spider is connected to the spirit tree with his new Kuru, but he's still wearing a breathing mask to breathe underwater, indicating that despite him becoming like half Navi, half human, breathing underwater for a human will still be as normal. He still won't be able to go underwater for 10-20 minutes like a Metkayina or a trained Ometekai Navi would. I do wonder his limitations in becoming this half human, half Navi hybrid. Does it only imply that he can breathe on Pandora, or does it give him some sort of other abilities? I mean, we do know he gets a Kuru, but does it make him stronger, faster, or anything else? Because like I said, this shot indicates that he cannot breathe underwater normally like a Navi can, hence why he still has to wear a mask. The trailer then cuts to Neytiri, Jake, Tonowari and Ronel on top of Skimwings, where we see a massive Tulkun with rings coming out of the water, and you can see Neytiri is kind of startled by this, turning around, seeing the majestic creature. And we know, based on some information about the matriarch, essentially the leader of the Tulkun Tulkun, that the rings is an indication that it is the leader of the clan. And then as the camera kind of pans out, giving us a wide shot, a beautiful shot, we can see multiple Tulkun coming out of the water, as it's possibly the Council of Tulkun, something Empire Magazine hinted at a couple of issues ago. Based on the lighting, this is probably early on in the day, because we know the concept art showing us the Council of Tulkun was at nighttime. So I do wonder if this is essentially them getting ready, gathering all the Tulkun before the ceremony.
Protect your sisters. Yes, sir. Stay in the cover. What does that always say?
Sully, stick together.
No, the other one.
Sully never quits.
That's right. Sully's never quit.
The trailer then cuts to a big action set piece where we see Varang on top of her Night Wraith with a lot of Ash warriors next to her, and you can see in front on top of her Night Wraith they have that flaming pot which they use to light their arrows. You can see a lot of the other Ash warriors has that smoke trail behind them, which will be important in a moment because all of them is essentially an explosion waiting to happen because of this fiery liquid pot on top of the Ikrans. And you can see the Ash Clan is raiding the Wind Traders. You can see their Wind Traders caravan at the back there. And you can see based on the background, this seems to be taking place near the forest area close to the Metkayina, as they've been traveling away from the Metkayina. So we know the Ash Clan isn't going to attack the Wind Traders near the Metkayina. Now we do see a shot of Jake telling Luwak to protect his sisters, and behind Jake is Kiri as well as Tuk. You can see Tuk is also wearing a new poncho, one of the Wind Traders ponchos based on the color and pattern. And then since, well, now in charge, he has to protect his sisters because, well, Natem, need I say more? Then we get a quick glimpse on top of one of these caravans that's on fire, where you see Spider in front of Kiri, which is in front of Tuk. And you can see an Ash Clan warrior in front of Spider, just showing their size compared to a human. And next to that Ash Clan warrior is a dead Wind Trader Na'vi, likely killed by this Ash Clan warrior. And then Spider, getting ready for action, pulls his bow, hopefully hitting this Ash Clan Na'vi. Then it transitions to Varang shooting a fire arrow, and although the trailer makes it out to seem like she is shooting the Medusoid, making it explode, I don't think that is the case. You see, if you look at the explosion that happens on the Medusoid, you can see some sort of smoke trail happening, almost as if a ship, a flaming ship, is crashing down on top of it. And then you can also see there are 3 Na'vi lying next to it, looking very dead to me. And I do think that it was an Ikran, an Ash Clan Ikran, that essentially crashed into the Medusoid, causing it to explode. Because we know the Ikran of the Ash Clan has those fire pots on it, and as indicated earlier, they have those smoke trails. And not only that, you can see next to these 3 Na'vi are fire arrows, and those dead Na'vi looks like Ash Clan warriors. So I do think Jake probably shot the Ash Clan warriors out of the sky, maybe killing the Ikran as well, which caused the Ikran to essentially crash down on top of the Medusoid. So indirectly, maybe this is Jake's fault because he killed a flying, flaming Ikran, which then crashed down on top of the Medusoid, but I highly doubt that Varang's arrow caused this. Additionally, you can see Varang at the top there flying away. She's not flying towards the Medusoid. So even if this was her aiming at the Medusoid, it doesn't line up with the angle. Hence why I think that it's likely an Ikran with one of those flaming pots on top of it that was killed and essentially crashed down on top of the Medusoid, causing this massive explosion. And you can see the explosion has some sort of shockwave heading towards Jake as he's trying to run away from it, but eventually does catch up with him, and he slides down this Medusoid on the side, likely falling on one of those fins, or maybe his Ikran catches him, I don't know, but it does look like he slides down, falling on one of those fins, which which probably will act as a net. Then the trailer cuts to the kids. Kiri, Tuk, Spider and Luwak in the forest, where Luwak asks Tuk, what does dad always say? And as we know, the answer to that is Sullies stick together, but Luwak then tells her, no, the other one, where she says Sullies never quit. But what you might also know about this shot is that in one area we see Spider turning around and we can see that he still has his mask in the scene, so this takes place before he transitions to the half Na'vi, half human hybrid.
How do you still live?
What if every human being on Earth could live here without a mask? Then the Na'vi people will be gone.
Whoa.
We then get to the really interesting part of the trailer, and something I wish they kept for the movie and didn't show in the trailer, and that is of course how Spider essentially becomes the half human, half Na'vi hybrid. Now we see him being consumed in a way we saw Grace and Jake from the first Avatar movie, and this is likely Kiri's doing based on some leaked scripts that we know, as we see all of the stuff going into his mouth, his nose, into his eyes, and is essentially what gives him the ability to breathe on Pandora. It then cuts to Varang and the Ash Warriors holding Spider captive, where she asks him, how do you still live? And based on the IMAX ratio of the first trailer, we knew that Varang was going to capture Spider, because in the aspect ratio it reveals Varang holding Spider's hair. And in the shot which shows Varang, we can actually see somebody in the background, which I'm guessing is Kiri, because again, going back to the first trailer, we know that she also captured Kiri. But an interesting thing about Spider here, aside from, well, him breathing on Pandora, on his shoulder is some sort of, I don't know, it looks like webbing, looks like spider webs, or maybe like skin shedding. I'm not entirely sure what is happening there. Maybe it is part of his body adapting to the new changes, but I really don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. Jake then asks Norm, what if every human can essentially live on Pandora without a mask? Which is a very interesting question to ask. But what's even more interesting is the scans behind him. You can see there that there's a scan of lungs and a brain scan, and then of course a human scan next to Norm, which is likely that of Spider. So they're probably studying or scanning Spider after the new changes. And I do wonder if this is connected to the behind the scenes shot that we got a long time ago, where we saw Spider looking at a link unit, and initially I thought based on that image that Spider would get his own avatar, but I do think that maybe he gets in that machine to be studied essentially by Norm. Then as the trailer continues, we see Spider walking without a mask, looking up, and then we see Neytiri looking down. So I do wonder if these two scenes are connected. Maybe this is the first time Neytiri is seeing Spider after his change, being amazed about what's happening. And you can also see Neytiri still has that bandage across her shoulder, as we know she gets shot by an arrow. But then Jake says to Neytiri that the Na'vi people will be gone, which seems very out of context. I mean, it's certainly not connected to what he said previously about every human breathing on Pandora without a mask. And also, I mean, in this scene, we see Neytiri dressed up in Ash Clan paint. So I'm not entirely sure why she's dressed up in Ash Clan paint. Maybe she tried to blend in to try and save Kiri, because as I've mentioned, we know Kiri and Spider gets captured by Varang. So I don't know if this is her trying to blend in, trying to infiltrate the Ash Clan, trying to save them, or if this is her trying to join the Ash Clan. But it is really interesting to see her in this paint nonetheless. We then get our first glimpse of a human bonding with an animal on Pandora, and that's Spider bonding with an elu, something I never thought I would see in the Avatar franchise. And of course, Kiri is helping him with that. She's looking very, very excited for him to experience this. And you can see he has these little goggles on the front, because of course he cannot really protect his eyes the way a Na'vi can. Again, makes me wonder, to what extent does his body adapt to this new change? Is it only breathing, or are there other parts of his body that adjusts as well?
You want to spread your fire across the world. You need me.
We must fight!
We then see Varang doing the bond with Quaritch, and I just love his expression in his face there. It's like "Ooh, what are you doing?" Like doing something inappropriate, and he's like very uncomfortable with it, kind of forcing him down on his knees. And you can see she's surrounded by the Ash Warriors, but right behind her on the floor is Loak. At least it looks like Loak. He also has those rider pants that we saw earlier. And then right behind Quaritch, there's somebody lying down unconscious. Now, I'm not entirely sure who that is. It could be Jake, it could be somebody else. I'm not entirely sure. The face is kind of blurred or obscured by one of the plants. It is kind of dark, so I can't really make out a lot of it. But if you want to drop a comment guessing who that is, then please do let me know. And then we get to see the Ash Clan warriors doing their ritual, which we've seen concept art of before when the title was announced last year of Fire and Ash. And they're just really going crazy here, jumping through and over the fire. I'm not really sure what's going through their mind here, but they're essentially worshipping Varang, and it is some sort of ritual, judging by the time of day. Maybe this is kind of like a victory ritual. Maybe they won the battle against the Wind Traders and they caught Quaritch and some of the other Metkayina, and now they're celebrating some sort of victory. But Quaritch then has an interaction with Varang where he tells her or asks her, "You want to spread your fire across the world? You need me," indicating that they should form an alliance. And we do get to see Quaritch and Varang walking together with the RDA in the background. And of course, next to Quaritch is Lyle, because we know he didn't die in Avatar: The Way of Water. But then we get a very interesting shot, and that is the RDA arriving at the Cove of the Ancestors. And there's something going on there, something strange, which looks to be connected to the end part of the first trailer where everything is just floating and going haywire. I do wonder if this is the part where the spirit tree kind of glows and Eywa is basically fighting back, because we do have two sea dragons here. We have the massive factory ship and a lot of RDA coming towards the Metkayina ready for battle, and I'm guessing this is likely the final battle scene of the movie. Then it cuts to Loak saying we must fight in front of a lot of Tulkun, and he looks at Neytiri, and behind Neytiri of course is Rotto and Anung, and in the middle there is Tireya. And this is probably the moment where Loak realizes that he is the leader, he needs to take over, he's going to be in charge, because we know that essentially he's going to be the narrator going forward. And then for a moment we see the factory ship in the front with a lot of RDA force behind it, and we see tons of crab suits going into the ocean, getting ready for battle. And this is probably connected to that scene where we see Kiri underwater with all of the Mako subs and the crab suits behind her.
Call upon the warrior mother.
The trailer then continues showing Kiri underwater saying, "I call upon the warrior mother," similarly to what Neytiri did in the first Avatar movie. And I'm guessing this scene is connected to the one where she and Spider is underwater, which showed earlier. Then it shows Ronel underwater getting off her skim wing. We can see the skim wing on the side there as she's attacking a crab suit with her spear, stabbing holes in it, causing it to flood. And we can see that she is still pregnant in the scene. So I do wonder if we will see her giving birth in the third movie. We'll likely see that, but I do wonder when that will happen, because we can see the crab suit being flooded, and then we can see Kiri using her powers similarly to what she did at the end of The Way of Water. And of course next to her is Spider, again with a mask, because like I said earlier, it doesn't seem like him being a half human half Na'vi hybrid can breathe underwater the same way a Na'vi can. But I do wonder if he uses a gill mantle, if that will work. I'm not entirely sure. Then we see some squid-like creatures jump out of water attacking the RDA. I don't believe we've seen these creatures before. If we did, I'm not entirely sure what they're called. And we can see some arrows in the side of the boat there. And then the big reveal of the trailer, one of the biggest reveals of the trailer, is the return of the great Leonoptrix, Turuk, and Jake reuniting with it. And I really wish they didn't show this in the trailer. It would have been such an incredible reveal if we saw this in cinemas in and we didn't know that this would happen. I mean, akin to this, it would be like showing Captain America wheel Mjolnir in the trailers, as that was such an awesome moment in Endgame, as I do feel that this would be such an epic moment had they not shown it in the trailers. But we'll see what waits in the final movie. And then we see Neytiri attacking a dragon ship, and we can see at the bottom there is a sea dragon, so this is likely connected to the one where the RDA arrives, and she is holding some sort of explosive tip on her arrow, which then causes the dragon ship to explode, which is likely going to be an epic action scene. But heading on to the final bit of the trailer.
I'll kill you! I swear!
As the final bit of the trailer kicks into full gear, we see again Varang on top of her Night Wraith with the Wind Traders at the background. So this likely takes place during that scene, and we can see Neytiri approaching Varang, ready to tackle her Night Wraith with her Ikran. And you can see her Night Wraith is kind of like pushing its talons, its feet upwards, almost like two eagles about to interlock, about to clash into one another. And you can see Varang is looking very fierce and angry in the scene, but then her Night Wraith is about to take a bite out of Neytiri, and you can see here that Neytiri has the arrow sticking out of her back, but luckily she dodges to the side as the Night Wraith misses, giving us a good indication of the teeth of this thing, which looks absolutely terrifying. And then as it goes to the side of Neytiri, you can actually see that the arrow pierced through her shoulder, which looks very, very painful. We know that she is injured in this battle, and you can clearly see that she was not only shot by an arrow, but the arrow pierced her shoulder, but she is still tough and fighting back. And then it gives us a quick glimpse again of the fight between Jake and Quaritch, which we've seen at the end of the last trailer. And as Quaritch jumps down, you can see somebody lying in pain there, and I'm guessing it's Jake, because as Quaritch jumps down, you can see him pulling out a knife. However, Spider then stands there saying or shouting, "I'll kill you, I swear." So I'm guessing that Quaritch and Jake has a big fight, and then somehow Quaritch wins the fight, maybe kicking Jake down from one of these floating rocks. And then as Quaritch approaches Jake, ready to kill him, Spider jumps in, saving Jake, eventually showing us that he chooses Jake above Quaritch. That'll be an interesting thing to see, because we know that Spider's been jumping around between choosing Jake and Quaritch, and I guess, or I'm speculating, that this is an indication that at the end he is going to choose Jake above Quaritch. Then we see Lawak with Payakan jumping out of the water, shooting the RDA, which looks really, really epic. And then finally we see Jake with the Great Leonoptrix flying down with 3 sea dragons at the bottom there. And we also see a glimpse of the factory ship right at the top there. And then of course Jake does his signature move with the Great Leonoptrix, something we saw in the very first Avatar movie, and then it cuts to the title, Avatar: Fire and Ash. And that is essentially my breakdown on the second trailer for Avatar: Fire and Ash. Now, the trailer is roughly 2.5 minutes long and gave us a ton of information. Some might say too much information. I honestly feel that they shouldn't show us anything else from the movie, because they've already given us so much on these first 2 trailers alone. But since it's Disney and based on how they handled Marvel movies, I'm guessing we're likely going to get a third trailer, the trailer that's kind of saying, you know, get your tickets now. And in between that, we're going to get a lot of clips when the cast is being interviewed. We're going to get clips and screenshots of the movie. So we're probably going to get a lot more if it's the same marketing, the way they did the marketing for The Way of Water. And as there's still 2 issues remaining from Empire Magazine in the Path to Pandora series, we will likely get even more from those 2 issues. Overall, I liked the trailer. The tone was a bit inconsistent in my opinion. I feel that between this and the first trailer, I do kind of lean more towards the first trailer, simply because it's more mysterious, it doesn't give that much away, and the music in that trailer was just much better than the music used in this trailer. But that was just my opinion. But if you've made it this far in the video, I want to say a huge thanks for watching this breakdown and for being patient. As I said at the beginning of this video, I was away for 10 days and had no idea the trailer would drop. drop, so it caught me completely off guard, and while I was away I couldn't really make any videos, so I do appreciate your patience on this. But if there's anything that I got wrong or anything that you feel I've missed in the breakdown, then do let me know in the comments below. But what I would like to know from you is, what is your favorite part of the second trailer? Let me know in the comments below, and for more Avatar content, have a look at the rest of my channel. Until next time, have a fantastic day and stay safe.